Well, I think the first point to make is that a woman's depression is fundamentally no different from a man's depression. The source of it is around worrying too much and dreaming too much and exhaustion and about a failure to live a life that works. I think that's a really important thing to say. But of course, women are different from men. They have very profound emotional differences between men and women. And these differences certainly mean that women tend to get depressed more than men. I think the official figures in the United Kingdom are that 3 out of 4 depressions is a depression by women, that a woman is 3 times more likely to be depressed than a man. And when I look at the clients who come to see me concerning depression, that's what I find. So depression is essentially mainly a mental problem that women suffer from. Men suffer from it too, of course, but women suffer from it much more. And so you have to understand what it is about the women's brain and about how women's work and how women think about things and sort out problems that maybe creates these additional susceptibility to depression. And the answer is very simple. While men are problem solvers and like to stick to one thing and make things work, women can hold more than one idea in their head. This is not just a fantasy. This is actually the truth. Women can multitask. Women are much more open to their emotions. They're much more interested in talking about their emotions, and they're much more interested in processing information and dealing with it in a kind of non-judgmental, equalizing way. And this means that worry is much more common for women. Women worry more, and so that's their way of solving problems, and if the worry works, then the problem will be dealt with. But if worrying doesn't solve their problems, if they find themselves worrying and not making progress, then a woman, more likely than a man, will slip into a depression. We'll be talking about men in another session, and men, when they have problems, they're much more likely to look for solutions in addictive behavior, and addictive behavior is much more a men's mental problem. And that makes sense too, but we'll be talking about that later. And it also explains why, and I've looked at the figures, about that 80% of the counseling profession is of women, because women are much more open to the idea that if you talk about a problem and you play around with that problem, you will find a solution. And I think that's another reason why typical counseling is really not the best help for somebody who has depression. Because as I've said before, if you are really depressed and your mind is going 100 to 1,000 and you are thinking and worrying a lot, then the last thing you need to do in the first instance is to talk about your problem. And it's interesting that in terms of human givens therapists, there are many more men do it than women. That many more men do it than do typical counseling. I think it's about 50-50, men and women. And that's quite unusual if you make the comparison between traditional counseling. And I'd just like to say one final word about postnatal depression, because postnatal depression is quite clearly a depression only suffered by women, and there is a lot argued that this is in some sense special, but it's not. Postnatal depression has the same causes and the same way of working out than all other depression, because the state of having a baby creates enormous changes for women. They're tired, they can be exhausted, they can be isolated from their work and their friends, there may be relationship issues that arise out of a depression, they clearly feel incredibly responsible for their new baby, or some might be horrified to find that they don't. There are all emotional worries that are essentially driving excess sleep, excess dreaming sleep, and exhaustion. As I say, you might as well have a separate "I've been jilted by my girlfriend" depression, as you might as well be arguing that postnatal depression is fundamentally different. And as I've worked with a number of women who have postnatal depression, I found that the solution and the help they need is basically the same.